My 12-year-old daughter just told me that her legs felt sore for the first time. And I was thinking to myself, wait until you're in your 5th decade of life. Now look, as a master's runner, I'm sore all the time. And I just sent a big email campaign to the Strength Running email list all about running well while also taking into consideration longevity and the aging process and the things that you have to do in the training process to keep running well into your master's years, your grandmaster's years, and beyond. And in this video, I want to share some quick tips with you to make the training process just a lot more manageable when you're a little bit older, because we're not going to be 25 forever. We're not going to be at the peak of our testosterone and hormonal profile forever. So we've got to take some steps to mitigate what happens when we age. And in this video, I've got 10 strategic ways for you to delay the aging process, to help yourself feel better on each run, and to mitigate some of the problems that inevitably occur when you start getting older. Okay, our first strategy is a warm-up. Very simple. If you're not already doing a dynamic warm-up before you head out for your run, let's start today, because a dynamic warm-up is not only going to help you feel better in the first mile of your run, but those dynamic flexibility exercises and light strength work is going to help you get a little bit stronger and help preserve a lot of that coordination, athleticism, and proprioception that we tend to lose in our later years. So this is one way to stave off some of those coordination problems, to maintain a little bit of strength, and also just help you feel better in the early parts of your run. Next, when it comes to intensity, we're probably going to have to dial that back. Now, there's no perfect number here. It doesn't matter, I'm not going to advise you to do 1 workout a week or 2 workouts a week. What I am going to say is look at what your body is used to, and we're going to have to reduce that. So if you're used to running 3 hard workouts a week, you're inevitably going to have to reduce that to 2 and then likely to 1 over time. Now, if this is going to happen overnight, you're probably going to have to make that reduction over the course of 1 to 2 decades. But the general principle is that you likely have to reduce intensity because we simply don't recover as quickly as we normally did once we get into our 40s and beyond. Now, even though we're probably going to be eliminating some intensity from our training schedule, we can also replace some intensity with intensity on a cross-training medium, whether that's the bike, maybe on the elliptical, or in the pool with some aqua jogging. Let's not overlook cross-training as a really valuable way to still get in some of the intensity that we need to maintain our anaerobic power, but we can do it with a cross-training medium like the bike. And this is a really great way to still get in that intensity without the injury risk of running. Because when we recognize that your injury risk actually increases exponentially the faster we run, we realize we've got to be really judicious with our speed work. That's why in your 40s and 50s and beyond, we have to reduce some of that intensity, but we can also replace it with cross-training. So some of it is simply being swapped out for intensity on the bike or in the pool, as opposed to intensity out on the road or track. Once we do get a little older, it's probably also a good idea to not only get rid of some intensity or replace it, but let's also incorporate rest days into our weekly schedule. Not just any old rest day, but we really want 1 or 2 complete days off from running, and quite typically days off from intensity as well. So we don't want to take a day off from running, but then do a hard bike ride with a workout. We probably want 1 or 2 days off completely, where maybe we can do something very low intensity like an easy walk, an easy yoga session, something along those lines to keep the body moving, but not in a way that's going to increase the recovery demands on our body, which are already maxed out. We need those days for recovery. So starting in your 40s, I more and more encourage an actual 1 or 2 days off completely from any kind of hard exercise. Now, because our recovery as older runners isn't as good as what it was when we were 25 years old, we have to be better at recovery in our older years. And this means, number one, sleep. Sleep is our most important recovery tool. Let's make sure we're getting our 8 hours as best as we can. We can't recover from one off night of 5 hours like we used to decades ago. So it's all about consistency and stacking. Great night of sleep after great night of sleep. But we can't ignore other recovery modalities too, like trying to do some contrast therapy. One of my personal favorites is compression. Using compression on long runs in a form of tights or something along those lines, but more importantly, using recovery compression tights after our hard efforts. And I'm really excited that 2XU is the sponsor for this video. They are the world's premier compression maker, and they have some of the best compression tights that I've ever worn. And if you go to 2XU.com and use code Jason, they've generously offered to take 20% off anything on their website that's not already on clearance or a wetsuit. So I encourage you to go to 2XU.com, get yourself some of the best compression gear that money can buy, and you're gonna be feeling better day after day, which is exactly what we need as an aging runner. Now, from a nutrition perspective, we also wanna try to get in more protein. When we get older, not only do we need more protein because we don't absorb and utilize protein as efficiently as we did when we were younger, but it's gonna help us recover even faster from hard exercise, particularly the exercise like intense speed workouts and long runs. Those training sessions where we experience the most amount of muscle damage. Protein is what's gonna help repair that muscle damage. While we normally think of carbohydrate as important for fuel, for recovery, that helps fuel the work itself, right? That's your gas tank. But if you want to keep your vehicle, your body in good working order so that you have the proper home for that fuel, we need to get in enough protein. That's going to help ensure our muscles are fully recovered and we can handle the impact of running. We can generate the forces needed to run fast, and we're just going to feel better and better on a daily basis. So let's aim to get in our protein. I'll put a link under this video to a really great podcast episode I did with Claire Shorenstein. She's a registered dietitian. We talked about the new rules of protein intake for endurance runners. You got to check it out. Now, on the carb side of things, we probably want to be more strategic with our carb intake as we get older, just because our metabolisms are slowing down a little bit. We're probably being a little bit more sedentary outside of running than we were when we were in our 20s, and we likely can't consume the same number of calories through carbohydrate that we once did decades ago. So this is where being really strategic with our carb intake is going to be helpful. Yes, we want to be fully carbed up before a run. We want to fuel appropriately for every hard workout or long run that we're doing. And of course, we want to refuel. But should we be eating 100 grams of carbohydrate at every single meal, focusing on massive amounts of carbs at every snack? Probably not. We want to do the calculations necessary to understand our carb needs and not go too much beyond them, because that's going to contribute problems to our general health, and it's going to also contribute to excessive weight gain, because if we're not using that fuel as actual fuel for exercise, it's just going to be stored as fat. So let's be really mindful about how much carbohydrate we're getting in during the day, not just for our runs and how we're fueling those runs. And that's going to make a material impact on maintaining good body composition, while at the same time making sure you're fueled for those runs. Now, of course, we can't talk about aging without talking about strength training. The older you are, the more important strength training gets. So I certainly want to encourage everyone to start the strength training habit today. The hardest part about strength training is getting it in, is making the time and making it that consistent habit. You've made running a consistent habit, and that's often some of the hardest part about being a good runner, is giving yourself the opportunity to be a good runner with the consistent work that it takes. Same thing is true with getting stronger, with building injury resiliency, and giving yourself the opportunity to put yourself in an anabolic state where you actually can build a little bit of muscle, which is helpful for your long-term health prospects. These things are more and more important as you get older, so I'll certainly encourage everyone, let's start strength training yesterday. If you haven't already, you could start with some body weight exercises, but I think after a month or two, once you've developed a little bit of consistency, then is the time to get in the gym or build out a home gym or go to a local Y or rec center and get lifting weights. This is almost a non-negotiable in my view when it comes to aging and running. If you want to be a good runner in your 50s and 60s and beyond, strength training is a mandatory part of that process because of its longevity benefits, because of the way that it complements running so that you're not always in a catabolic state, you're not always burning all those calories and potentially that muscle tissue if you're not getting enough protein. Strength training counterbalances that and really helps you age gracefully as an endurance runner. Another great way to make running easier as you're getting older is to simply start each run easier. You know, one of the things that I've noticed in a little over 14 years of coaching is that a lot of runners will have a positive split to their training runs, and they'll start a little bit quicker and they'll generally fade as the run goes. I would love to switch that and see the opposite. Let's have you start a little easier. If your first mile of every run is your slowest mile, that's the way to do it. You're using the beginning of the run to complete the warm-up process before you even get into that good zone 2 effort that a lot of your distance runs are going to be in. So let's use the first mile or so of that run, the first 2 kilometers or so, to help the warm-up process along and help you ease into the run. You're going to help yourself feel better, and I believe there's a solid injury prevention stimulus to this practice so that you're not just running harder and running faster when you're not warmed up. Finally, this is a more philosophical point, but I think older runners should just generally be a little bit more risk averse. Let's say you planned an 8 or 9 mile trail run with the boys. What if it goes to 12? Should you do that if you're 52 years old? I don't think you should. I think maybe you can stretch it a little bit, maybe by a mile or 2, but if the run is going to be a lot longer than you anticipated, it might be worth it for you to stop and walk it in. Same thing goes for a workout. If you're scheduled to do 8 by 400 meters and your buddy wants to do 8 by 800 meters or just wants to run significantly faster in this workout, here is where you can't be as risk-taking as you were when you were younger. Let's be more risk averse. Let's be more cautious. Let's put our health first so that we are not always putting ourselves in a position where we have to recover from something that we're not actually able to recover from. You know, I think recovery is often talked about what you can do to mitigate soreness and fatigue. But what happens if you're too sore and fatigued? What happens if you've done something that you shouldn't have done? Well, no amount of recovery strategies is going to help you dig yourself out of that hole. You probably just need to stop training for a couple extra days to help yourself recover. We don't want that. And so we need to not put ourselves in any situation where we're going to do something that's too much, too fast, or just too complex for our current abilities. That is a really great way to prevent your next injury and to prevent you just from not feeling like you are capable out there when you're running. All right, my friends, those are some of what I think are the most effective strategies to keep running well as you get older. Let's focus on recovery. Let's be more risk averse, not do so much volume and so much intensity. And with these strategies, I think you're going to be an aging gracefully runner. You are going to be doing things the right way, and you're definitely going to be feeling better as you age. And again, a big thanks to 2XU for sponsoring this video. I couldn't do this without them. I love their gear. I have so many of their recovery tights, their half tights, their cold weather tights. They're fantastic. Go to 2XU.com, use code Jason. You're going to get 20% off almost everything on their site. There's also a link with more details under this video if you want to check them out. And here's to running well for decades to come.